The car slowed to a stop at the intersection, and that's when I saw them. 10, maybe 15 men, creeping out of the shadows like vultures surrounding prey. They didn't know the man behind the wheel was more than just a husband or a father. They were about to learn the hard way that I was black ops for 20 years. And in that moment, I promised myself, no one I love walks out of this alive if I'm not standing between them and death. Hit like, subscribe for more betrayal stories, and comment your city or country. The evening air was crisp, the city lights outside dimming as the sun dipped below the horizon. I was driving home, my hands steady on the wheel, Amelia and Harper laughing quietly in the back seat. Normal, a feeling so fragile it scared me, because I knew what was about to shatter it all. We rolled forward cautiously, the intersection up ahead glowing red. That's when I saw them, shadows rising from the sidewalks, sliding behind cars, closing around us like a noose. The gang had worked fast. No sirens, no warning. Just cold, calculated threat aimed at my family. My heart slammed in my chest. Not out of fear. No, that was buried deep. This was survival instinct kicking in. 20 years of black ops training surfaced like muscle memory. I locked eyes on the closest man. He looked young, eager, a glance full of adrenaline and brute confidence. The others mirrored him, surrounding the cars every side. Amelia smiled softly behind me. "Look at Harper playing with her doll," she said without a care, a smile that broke my heart. They didn't see the danger, didn't know the car was their lifeboat or their coffin. The tension was deafening in the silence. The car doors locked automatically, and the engine held a low hum, like the calm before a storm. The driver in me, logical, calculated, knew what was coming. Intimidation, threats, and trying to rattle us into submission. But I'm no ordinary man behind a wheel. I adjusted my grip and kept my voice steady. "Stay calm," I said, more to myself than to Amelia. She turned to me with eyes wide, a flicker of fear breaking through her usual strength. Harper clutched her doll tighter. The first man knocked on my window, sharp, forceful. I stared him down with a look no one should ever get behind, but few live to tell about. "Open up," he demanded, voice rough, full of menace. I whispered, "Not yet." Another block, another knock. The circle tightened, and their shadows loomed like death waiting to strike. I wasn't bluffing when I said they had no idea who they were messing with. 20 years ago, this life would have been different. But this wasn't about hitting back with guns blazing. This was about protecting what mattered through silence, through a quiet strength most don't see coming. The gang assumed the driver was a scared man, beaten down like the rest of their easy targets. They thought they had a family trapped, ready to beg for mercy. I didn't move. I waited, watching their fingers twitch on guns hidden beneath jackets, feeling Amelia tense behind me and Harper's little fingers clutch mine. "Why aren't you scared?" the lead man shouted. "We're taking everything tonight." I just smiled quietly, because fear is a tool, not a weakness. The city seemed to pause for a heartbeat. The car windows fogging with the fragile weight of dread and the cold promise of violence. In that silence, I remembered every mission, every training drill, every moment I swore to protect what mattered, even if it cost me everything. The gang's plan was about to fail, not because of brute force, but because of quiet, unyielding control behind this wheel. Suddenly, an idea sparked, a subtle maneuver blending instinct and experience. The car's engine didn't roar to life, but shifted strategically. The men hesitated, confused, their faces flickering between confidence and doubt. Amelia whispered, trembling, "What are you doing?" "Trust me," I said. One man reached for the door handle, but my hand shot up, steady and unflinching. That's when the first shot rang out, a warning rather than a kill. Bullets pounded against the hood, shattering the fragile safety of glass and metal. My daughter screamed. The world constricted to the heartbeat between life and death. I didn't flinch. The gang thought this was their moment. They were wrong. With a controlled breath trained by years of wars they'd never see, I shifted the car into gear. A sudden, sharp burst tore us free from the trap like a snake striking its prey. The tires screamed against asphalt as I weaved through the attackers, dodging every desperate move. Beyond the immediate danger, something darker simmered. This wasn't just a random attack. It felt personal, designed. The questions flooded my mind as the city blurred past in a chaotic streak. Who sent them? Why now? And what did they want with the family they clearly underestimated? When I finally pulled into a quiet, dimly lit parking lot, my hand still gripped the wheel tight, knuckles white. Amelia's tears were silent, and Harper shook softly against her side. I looked at them, shared the calm that flew against the storm raging inside me. "This isn't over," I said quietly. Amelia reached for my hand, searching for a truth I wasn't ready to give. What I couldn't tell her yet was the truth buried deep in my past. The missions that shaped me, the betrayals I survived, the enemies still waiting in the shadows. No one knew who I had been. And now, no one would suspect just how far I was ready to go to protect the family that meant everything. As sirens in the distance broke the fragile silence, I made a promise, not just to my family, but to myself. This fight wasn't going to be clean. It wasn't going to be loud. It was going to be deadly quiet revenge. The streets outside our home were quiet, but inside, the silence was heavy. It pressed on me like a weight I couldn't shake, thick with unsaid truths and flickering fears. Amelia sat stiffly on the couch, cradling Harper, who was too young to understand the danger but old enough to feel the shift in the air. I watched them from across the room, my heart breaking for the innocence I was forced to protect by telling lies. After the attack, the police swarmed the scene like vultures circling a dying animal. Blue and red lights flashed relentlessly, illuminating the cracks that had begun to form in our family's armor. I played my part, calm, cooperative, but cautious. I answered their questions with rehearsed precision, leaving out anything that might expose the truth, anything that might bring the past flooding back like a relentless tide. There was no one else there, I told the detective, my voice steady but distant. Just a random attack. A failed carjacking. They didn't succeed, so it's over. But the lies settled uneasily in my chest. It was necessary, for Amelia, for Harper, for the life I still wanted to protect. But necessary doesn't mean easy. The truth was a darker shadow. The men who surrounded us weren't random criminals. They were professionals. And they knew something about me I thought long buried. That night, Amelia couldn't sleep. She glanced at me more than once, her eyes searching for answers in the quiet space between us. The woman I married was strong, capable of facing storms, but even she struggled with the uncertainty I forced upon her. "Why didn't you call me when it happened?" Amelia's voice broke the silence unexpectedly. I looked up from my thoughts, forcing a calm smile. "I didn't want to scare you." Her eyes narrowed, suspicion and hurt mixing in the dim light. "You weren't scared? You're acting like it was nothing, and yet you won't tell me what really happened." The truth hit like a blow. How do you explain years of secrets, the missions that never made it home, the part of yourself you bury to protect the people you love? I wanted to say, you couldn't understand. Instead, I just stayed quiet. Days turned into restless nights as Amelia pulled away, her trust unraveling thread by thread. The woman who once shared my every breath now kept her distance, the space between us filled with questions I refused to answer. Meanwhile, I couldn't rest. I had to find out why our family was targeted. The attack was no accident. Someone had sent that gang intentionally, and I intended to find out who. I reached out to a ghost from my past, an old contact, Dominic, someone I trusted once but who now lived in the gray. His name echoed in buried memories of undercover operations and secret missions. I swallowed my pride and called him, hoping he still held the threads I needed. His reply was cautious, slow. "Logan, you need to be careful. You don't want to stir things back up." But stirring was the only way forward. Within 48 hours, Dominic gave me a name, one tied to debts and shady deals, a small-time criminal owed favors to dangerous men. The pieces fit too neatly, but my gut told me the story was more complicated. Back home, the tension thickened. Amelia's eyes reflected the growing storm between us, a wedding built on silence and lies now showing its cracks. One evening, she confronted me. "You're hiding something, and it's killing us both." I nodded, knowing silence wouldn't last forever. "I was trained to protect you. Sometimes, the truth can hurt more than the lie." Her reply was a mixture of anger and desperation. "How many lies will it take before I don't recognize the man I married?" I wanted to hold her and tell her everything. The wars I fought, the missions that shaped me, the enemies I made. But those stories belonged to a past I wasn't sure she was ready for. Yet, the past was creeping closer, as dangerous as the night that tried to steal my family. I dove deeper into my old world, accessing hidden channels, encrypted messages, and broken networks. Every clue was a thread pulling me down a darker path. Late at night, when Amelia and Harper finally slept, I sketched out timelines, faces, and locations. The attack had been precise, too coordinated for small-time criminals. It was a warning wrapped in violence. I found myself walking a razor's edge, the man I was beneath the surface versus the husband and father they thought I was. My training kicked in, making me alert to the smallest sound, the slightest movement. Every shadow whispered secrets. Every knock on the door could be a threat. But it was also a lonely place to be, caught between worlds, protecting those I loved by pushing them away. One morning, Amelia left quietly before sunrise. I found a note pinned to the fridge. No accusations, no anger, just a plea. "Tell me the truth, or I don't know if I can stay." The words pierced me. The life I wanted to protect was fracturing because of the walls I built to keep danger out. That day marked a turning point. The lies had kept us safe for a moment, but they were breaking us in the long run. I promised myself I wouldn't let the past destroy the only family that mattered. I began making plans, not just for defense, but for reclaiming the life we nearly lost. I couldn't tell Amelia everything yet, not the whole truth, but I knew the time was coming when silence would no longer shield us. Underneath it all, the question lingered in my mind. Who really wanted me dead? And what price would I pay to keep my family alive? The first lie was told to keep Amelia and Harper safe, but every lie after would be harder to mask. The danger was no longer just in the shadows. It was bleeding into every corner of our lives. And I was running out of time. The silence in our home was suffocating. Amelia's cold distance was a constant reminder of the walls rising between us. Walls built from lies she sensed but couldn't break through. But beneath that fragile peace, I was already moving, reactivating a world I once left behind, a shadow network that was my secret lifeline. When I hung up on Dominic with the thin leads he gave, I knew it wasn't enough. The gang that chased my family was no ordinary crew. They were professionals. They had training, resources, and a message. And they weren't finished. I reached out to Harper's room quietly that night. She was asleep, clutching her favorite doll, unaware that her world was shifting beneath her feet. Then, back at my makeshift station, a corner of the garage transformed into a command center. I whispered into a secured line. "I need eyes on the eastern corridor. Check for any unusual activity. Confirm if number 5 has moved." The voice on the other end was clipped but reliable. "Understood. Surveillance is active." I wasn't just a man protecting his family. I was a hunter prowling a web of enemies and secrets. Years ago, the network I built in Black Ops was my shadow army. Forgotten signals, coded messages, off-the-grid contacts who owed their loyalty to me. I had hoped never to use it again. Now it was a lifeline. Every message that came in mixed coded threats with names I hadn't heard in years. Ghosts from a past life, suddenly very real and very dangerous. With every flicker of a screen, my heart wrestled between hope and dread. This wasn't a game. It was a battle for survival, and the first casualties were trust and innocence. 2 nights in, I got a lead. A shipment moving through a nearby warehouse belonging to the gang. The operation was precise, almost surgical. I sent a trusted contact, Ian, to scope the place under the cover of darkness. His reports came filtered, but enough to confirm that this wasn't just about crime. It was something bigger. By then, Amelia was watching me differently, not with suspicion, but a new fear. The man she thought she knew was slipping away. Her worry was a quiet presence, the unspoken question burning behind her eyes. How much of you is gone? I struggled with that too. Being a husband and father was my anchor, but the skills and instincts honed over 2 decades pulled me toward the shadows, a place where mercy and peace had no meaning. Amelia tried to breach the walls one night, her voice barely above a whisper. "Logan, please don't shut me out. We're in this together." I wanted to believe that, wanted to let her inside the storm I was facing. But I knew that day wasn't close. For now, silence was protection. Secrets were weapons. Behind closed garage doors, the network hummed. Data streams, geographical intel, intercepted calls. Each piece a puzzle showing the enemy's reach. They weren't just street thugs or desperate criminals. They were professionals with a plan aimed at me, my family, and the past I buried. I remembered that gray morning when I left the military, not in triumph, but with heavy shadows chasing my every step. I never imagined those ghosts would come for my family. Then came the first direct message. It was encrypted, sent through layers of digital dead drops. The sender's name was masked, but the words cut through the static like a knife. "You can't hide forever, Logan. Your past isn't finished with you." I stared at the screen long after the message disappeared, my heart thundering with the certainty of what was to come. The days blurred, each one bleeding into the next, filled with whispered plans and whispered fears. I became a man divided, an expert strategist protecting a fragile family, and the same relentless soldier hunting enemies in the dark. One evening, Amelia confronted me again. Her voice held a desperate strength I hadn't heard before. "You're changing. I don't know if I'm losing you or finding someone I never knew." I didn't have answers, only the cold truth. My past was a living thing, and it was catching up to us all. My calls to Dominic grew urgent. He confessed, finally, that he'd given our information to a local crime boss to cover a debt. But even he thought it was a simple threat, not the calculated hit that nearly cost my family everything. That revelation ignited a spark of betrayal, but also a deeper question. Who was the true mastermind pulling Dominic's strings? Then, a new player emerged, a lawyer named Preston, a man with a reputation for navigating deadly waters smoothly. I met him through Dominic's fear-soaked network, hoping for legal armor as well as strategic counsel. Preston's first words cut through the fog. "This isn't just about money or revenge. It's political and personal. You're a target because of what you know." I nodded. The puzzle pieces were falling into place. The attack was a message, a warning from someone higher up, someone who wanted to silence me. Amelia listened quietly as I explained parts of this new reality. Her face reflected every shade of fear and disbelief. The husband she loved was no ordinary man. This was not the peaceful life she'd imagined. One night, I watched her sleep, wondering if the scars of my secrets would ever heal. I promised myself I wouldn't let those scars break us, no matter what storm was coming. Because in this fight, there was no room for weakness. The enemy was closing in. The network pulsed with new threats. The past I thought I'd left behind was alive and hunting. And the man they thought they had cornered behind that car was already planning his next move. The phone call came late, its tone colder than any night I had faced in 20 years of service. Dominic's voice was hesitant, filled with regret and fear, words twisted with the weight of consequences I hadn't expected so soon. "I didn't know what it would lead to, Logan," he confessed, voice breaking. "I owed debts, bad debts. When they asked for a favor, I gave them your schedule, your family's routines. I thought it was just talk, just scaring you. I didn't think they'd actually move. Betrayal isn't sharp or sudden. It's slow, like rust eating at hard metal, unseen until everything crumbles beneath your hands. I sat in the dim light of my living room, the city outside still unaware of the fractures splitting my world, the man I trusted now unknowingly stained with my family's blood. Dominic was the first crack in a larger fault line, a fault line I was only beginning to see. The anger was silent, boiling beneath a veneer of control. I knew lashing out wouldn't fix the damage, but the sting of betrayal cut deep, echoing all the distrust I felt growing in Amelia's eyes. That night, I confronted Dominic at a rundown diner on the edge of the city. His face was pale, shadows of guilt heavy under his eyes. The man who once called me a friend now looked like a stranger. "I can't protect you anymore, Logan," he said quietly. "They're coming for all of us." His words confirmed what I already feared. The gang wasn't moving on. They were organized, relentless, and far more dangerous than anyone realized. I watched him carefully. Was this confession a plea for forgiveness, or a warning of the storm coming? Back at home, Amelia's questions grew sharper. The walls she'd built were crumbling from the truth I tried so hard to hide. She needed answers. I owed her that much. There was no easy way to say it. The life I left behind was violent and tangled with secrets that could pull us all under. But the weight of silence was heavier than any truth. One evening, Amelia stood before me, frustration raw in every word. "How much have you kept from me? How long are you going to protect me with lies?" Her voice shattered the calm I tried to hold. I wanted to reach out, to explain, but the secret was a tangled web, one unraveling too fast. I told her about the missions that shaped me, the debts I carried in shadows, and the enemies lurking in corners no one else could see. She listened quietly, tears tracing silent paths down her face. Our marriage, once unbreakable, was now fragile as glass. The betrayal wasn't just Dominic's. It was everywhere, infecting trust, love, and hope. The days that followed were a whirlwind of strategy and heartbreak. I hired Preston, a lawyer whose reputation for navigating dangerous waters was unmatched. He wasn't a savior, but a shield, a necessary ally in a battle that had become as much legal as it was life or death. With Preston's help, I started piecing together a defense for my family, while I prepared to fight the shadow war alone. Late nights blurred into early mornings as we pored over evidence, law books, and intelligence reports. Dominic's betrayal was only the beginning. The deeper we dug, the more we uncovered, a web of corruption extending far beyond street-level criminals. Political ties, money laundering, and old grudges buried in high places surfaced quickly. The attack on my family was no isolated incident. It was a message sent by those who wanted to erase the past, and me along with it. The threat grew clearer, sharper, until the line between friend and foe dissolved into suspicion. One afternoon, as I sat reviewing files, a messenger slipped me an envelope, unmarked, heavy with unseen threats. Inside was a photo, Harper playing in the park, smiling, unaware of the danger shadowing her steps. The message was simple and brutal. "We're closer than you think." Fear was no longer a distant echo. It was a pulse, constant and unforgiving. Yet, amidst the fear, I found a new clarity. The men circling my family weren't just criminals. They were pawns in a game much bigger than me. And the betrayal I encountered was just the surface of something darker. I looked at Amelia that night, her face tired but fierce, and realized the fight would require everything we had, and everything we were willing to lose. The days following the revelation about Dominic's betrayal unfolded like a nightmare I couldn't wake from. The thin veil of safety I had tried so desperately to weave around my family was tearing apart, thread by thread. But it wasn't the gang or the street-level criminals who haunted my every moment anymore. It was something far darker, far more calculated. After a restless night filled with fragments of memories and whispered warnings, I dove back into the shadows of my past. The gears of my mind shifted, turning over every mission, every rival, every ghost I thought long buried. The evidence no longer fit the simple story I'd been told. The gang was professional, yes, but not nearly enough to be the puppet masters of the assault on my family. Someone had used Dominic's debts as a pawn in a far more deadly game. A call came from an unexpected number, a voice I hadn't heard in decades, cold and sharp as ever. The words were clipped, purposefully vague but unmistakable. "You're meddling where you don't belong, Logan." The name wasn't spoken, but I knew it instantly. Victor, the man I'd once trusted most, the man who was presumed dead. My former handler, my mentor, the architect of missions I barely escaped with my soul intact. He had returned. Everything I thought I understood about the attack shattered instantly. This was not a criminal feud. It was a ghost from my past, rising to settle old scores, to erase inconvenient truths buried beneath years of silence. I realized then that the gang surrounding my car was never the main threat. They were the foot soldiers, the scorch marks warning of the fire to come. The voicemail ended with a chilling reminder. "You cannot run from me, Logan. And soon, neither can your family." I sat in the dim light of my office, the weight of that message sinking in. Victor didn't just want revenge. He wanted obliteration. Everyone who knew me, vulnerable or otherwise, was a target. Amelia's questions became sharper, her eyes reflecting the fear I hid behind calm words. I was no longer just the loving husband or devoted father. Now, I was a man burdened with a dangerous legacy threatening to drag us all under. The cold truth settled between us like frost on glass. I was forced to reveal fragments of my past, details I thought I'd never speak aloud. The Black Ops missions that changed me, the relationships severed in blood, the enemies made in shadows. Her face, at once strong and fragile, showed the complexity of trust breaking and rebuilding beneath a storm of secrets. "What kind of man have I married?" she asked one night, voice trembling but fierce. The answer was complex. I was a protector and a soldier, a man haunted by battles both fought and unfinished. But I was also a husband who loved fiercely, willing to face hell itself for his family. The days that followed became a blur of preparation and resolve. I refined every plan, every call, every piece of intel connecting Victor to a web of power and corruption that stretched far beyond the city limits. Preston, my lawyer, worked tirelessly to build legal shields for us, navigating the undercurrents of influence and danger with a precision that matched my own military tactics. The network I reignited in the shadows grew stronger, reaching contacts who whispered of Victor's movements and motives. Every lead pointed toward a final reckoning, a showdown months in the making. One night, a trusted contact came through with video footage, Victor, alive, moving through secure locations with a calculated purpose. The man who should have been dead was very much alive, and more dangerous than ever. The attack on my family wasn't a warning. It was the opening move in a far-reaching game of power, revenge, and betrayal. I shared this with Amelia, watching the flicker of shock and fear cross her face. But beneath it, I saw something else, a steel locking around her heart, a readiness to fight alongside me. Our family was no longer just threatened. They were caught in a war they hadn't chosen, forced into an impossible fight for survival and truth. I knew then that the time for silence was over. The quiet resilience I'd relied on needed to shift into action, smart, decisive, and unyielding. The game was no longer about hiding. It was about hunting. I vowed to protect Amelia and Harper with every ounce of strength and cunning I had left. Victor's shadow loomed large, but I was ready to face it. Because in this battle, there was no surrender, only survival. And the fight had just begun. The night was thick with silence, a silence that pressed down hard between Amelia and me, heavier than I ever imagined it could be. For years, I had kept secrets wrapped inside me like wounds that refused to heal, and now, the moment had come to lay them bare. She didn't deserve my silence. Harper deserved something better. But how could I let the truth free without breaking the fragile world we had left? Sitting at the kitchen table, the dim light casting long shadows across her face, I began my story. Not the full war stories or clandestine missions. Those were too much, too dark. But the parts that mattered. How Black Ops formed me, shaped me, and left scars beyond the physical. How after 2 decades of service, I had tried to leave that life behind for love, for family, for peace. Amelia's breath hitched once, twice, as the reality of my past washed over her. She saw not just the husband she married, but a man forged in battles she never knew existed. The ones behind closed doors, the ones fought in silence. "How long?" she finally asked, the single word carrying the weight of 1,000 questions. "How long have you been living this life in shadows?" I swallowed, my throat dry. Longer than I'd like. Her hand found mine across the table, trembling but steady. "Why didn't you tell me? Why keep us in the dark when we needed you most?" I wanted to say I was protecting her, shielding her from the pain, but that felt hollow against the truth. Sometimes protection meant distance. Silence was the weapon I chose, believing ignorance preserved innocence. But innocence was fragile, and in the spaces between our truths, cracks started to form. The nights grew restless. Amelia's eyes, once warm and trusting, flickered with doubt and fear. She moved through our home cautiously, like a soldier navigating a minefield of secrets. The distance was heartbreaking. It wasn't just the threat outside, it was the invisible barrier that grew between us. Yet, beneath the distance, a fragile hope lingered. The truth I laid bare wasn't easy for either of us, but it was the beginning of something real, a chance to rebuild on what was broken, to face the storm together, unfiltered. But the storm was already raging. Victor's shadow loomed larger than ever. The man I thought dead was orchestrating moves from the dark, his reach spreading like poison through everything I cared about. One morning, as sunlight fractured across the living room floor, a package arrived. No return address, no indication of sender, just a black envelope resting like a warning. Inside, a single note in familiar handwriting chilled me to the bone. "You can't run, Logan. You can't hide. Soon, you will lose everything." The message wasn't aimed only at me. It was a threat to Amelia and Harper, a brutal reminder that the war had found its way home. Despite the fear that settled like ice in my veins, Amelia did not waver. Her resolve, her quiet strength, was a beacon in the darkness I didn't realize I desperately needed. In that moment, I saw her not just as my wife, but as my partner in the battle we faced, united against a past neither of us chose, but both had to survive. The days became a whirlwind of strategy and planning. Preston, the lawyer navigating the perilous waters of our situation, worked tirelessly to build legal barriers around us, fighting the invisible fights no one saw. Meanwhile, my instincts sharpened. I was no longer just keeping threats at bay. I was preparing to strike back. Every lead, every piece of intelligence, brought us closer to understanding the depth of Victor's power and the extent of his vendetta. He wasn't just hunting me for revenge. He was dismantling everything I ever built, reaching into places I thought were safe. Amelia watched as I spent late hours poring over data, reconnecting with contacts, and orchestrating countermeasures. She learned to trust the man beneath the soldier, the husband fighting not just for survival, but for redemption and peace. Slowly, the walls between us rebuilt, not on lies, but on shared truths, painful and raw but real. "There's no going back," Amelia said one night, her voice steady, her hand clasped firmly in mine. I nodded. "No, only forward. Forward into a storm that promised no mercy, no easy victories, but one we would face, together. Because after all the betrayal, the secrets, and the shadows, One thing was certain: love, hardened by truth and tested by fire, could be the strongest weapon of all. The days after the unveiling of Victor's deadly shadow over my family left me with little choice but to shift from defense to offense. I had always been trained to anticipate, to strike before the enemy fully assembles. Now, every instinct screamed that waiting meant losing everything I held dear. Amelia and Harper were the center of my world, my reason to fight, my reason to survive. But protecting them required more than just muscle and training. It meant playing a game far more dangerous: strategy, patience, and cunning moves in a dance of shadows. I brought Preston into the fold fully then, beyond just a shield against legal threats. Preston wasn't just a lawyer. He was a warrior of words and tactics who understood the subtle pressures of power and influence. Together, we began weaving a plan that was as much about outsmarting the enemy as outlasting them. Preston's office was a small fortress of files, screens, and whispered conversations. He moved quickly, turning legal chaos into clarity, unearthing the cracks in Victor's alliances hidden beneath layers of sleek menace. "You're not just fighting a man," Preston reminded me during one tense meeting. "You're fighting a system, and a man who's more powerful than you realize." His words hit hard, but they didn't break me. They steeled me. We started by tightening every loose end. Surveillance increased around my family's home, with trusted professionals monitoring every unusual movement. Every phone call was scrutinized, every message encrypted and double-checked. But we didn't stop at defense. Victor's threat wasn't just about threats or intimidation. It was psychological warfare. I needed to show strength, resolve, and unpredictability. It was time to set the trap. Using my old network, I planted false information designed to flush out his operatives. Carefully controlled leaks hinted at my next moves, strategic weaknesses that could be exploited, a bait too tempting for any cold-blooded hunter to ignore. The first test came faster than expected. One evening, Preston called me urgently. "We have someone," he said, voice low but electric with a mix of excitement and danger. "An operative, flag trying to access your supply chain." We coordinated seamlessly, law and tactics merging into one sharp weapon. They arrived as usual, silent, calculating. But this time, the advantage was ours. Our surveillance and preset responses cornered them far from innocent families and homes. The man was captured, not physically strong enough to fight, but dangerous in what he knew. Interrogations through secure lines revealed fragments, names, places, cryptic hints pointing closer to Victor's inner circle. The law caught up with the dirty work, as Preston pushed legal boundaries and bureaucratic walls to isolate Victor's influence. Yet as the pieces fell into place, so did the stakes rise. Every success brought new retaliation, more veiled threats, and deeper shadows lurking in every corner. Amelia and Harper felt the pressure too, the subtle, quiet toll of living in a war zone disguised as normal life. But Amelia surprised me. The woman once overwhelmed by fear had become fierce. She learned to read the danger behind casual glances, to trust the instincts I previously hid. She transformed from victim to fighter in silent, steady strides. Our family was no longer just fighting for survival. We were becoming hunters. The tension ratcheted up with every move we made. Every intercepted call, every shadow follower exposed, felt like a step closer to an inevitable confrontation. But beneath it all, a personal battle raged inside me. The conflict between the soldier prepared for war and the husband and father desperate for peace. Preston reminded me often, no one can survive this alone. Your strength is as much in your allies as in your own skill. Taking his words to heart, I expanded the circle, trusted old friends, shadow contacts, even former adversaries who owed old favors. The lines between friend and enemy blurred in this high-stakes game. One night, after a late meeting with Preston, I returned home to a quiet house. Amelia and Harper were asleep, the only sound the faint hum of the city beyond our windows. I stood in the kitchen, tired but resolute. I knew this was far from over. Victor's shadow was still long, and his resources vast. But I was no longer the hunted. I was the hunter. The trap was set, the pieces in motion. And soon, the game would change. The capture of Victor's operative felt like a victory at first, a crack in the armor of the enemy that had haunted my family for weeks. Preston and I worked tirelessly through the interrogation process, peeling back layers of secrecy, following breadcrumbs that led deeper into a conspiracy far more complex than street-level crime. The operative talked, eventually. Names spilled out, locations whispered in fear, connections mapped across a web of corruption that stretched into places I never imagined. But even as we extracted information, something felt incomplete, like we were chasing shadows while the real threat watched from a distance, smiling. Then came the night that changed everything. I was alone in my makeshift command center, the garage transformed into a war room of screens, encrypted phones, and scattered intelligence reports. Amelia and Harper slept upstairs, unaware of the storm gathering momentum in the digital darkness around me. The message arrived without warning. A video file pushed through layers of encrypted channels, bypassing every security measure I'd carefully constructed. My blood ran cold as I opened it, knowing instinctively that whatever waited on the other side would redefine the battlefield. The screen flickered to life, and there he was. Victor, not a ghost, not a memory. The man himself, alive and staring directly into the camera with eyes as cold and calculated as I remembered from decades ago. My breath caught in my throat. Victor, my former handler, my mentor, the architect of missions that had shaped and scarred me, was supposed to be dead. The official reports had confirmed it years ago. An operation gone wrong, casualties taken, Victor among them. But official reports lied. "Hello, Logan." His voice cut through the silence like a blade sliding between ribs. "I've waited a long time for this moment. Did you really think you could walk away from our shared history? Did you believe the past would simply let you go?" His words weren't shouted or emotional. They were measured, deliberate, the tone of a man who held all the cards and knew it. "You became soft, Logan. You chose family over duty, love over loyalty. That made you weak. And weakness needs to be corrected." The camera angle shifted slightly, revealing a map behind him. My neighborhood, marked with precise locations. My home, Harper's school, the routes Amelia drove daily. The message was crystal clear. He knew everything. "The gang that surrounded your car was just the opening move," Victor continued, his smile cold and humorless. "A test to see how much fight you had left. And now I know. You're still the soldier I trained, but you're compromised. Your family is your vulnerability, and I will exploit it until there's nothing left." He leaned closer to the camera, his face filling the screen. "You can't hide from me. You can't protect them. Every ally you trust, every move you make, I'm 3 steps ahead. This isn't about revenge, Logan. This is about erasing loose ends. You know too much, and the only way to guarantee silence is complete elimination." The video cut to black, leaving me staring at my own reflection in the dark screen, heart pounding, mind racing through decades of memories and betrayals. Victor wasn't just alive, he was orchestrating everything. The attack on my family, the gang, Dominic's betrayal, all pieces in a game Victor had been playing from the shadows. The operative we captured wasn't a breakthrough. He was bait, designed to make me feel safe, while Victor tightened the noose. I sat in the darkness for what felt like hours, processing the magnitude of what I faced. This wasn't random violence or criminal opportunism. This was calculated psychological warfare waged by the one man who understood exactly how I thought, how I fought, and where my weaknesses lay. Amelia found me there in the early morning hours, still staring at screens filled with data that suddenly felt meaningless. "You didn't come to bed," she said softly, Concern etched across her face. I couldn't hide it anymore. The fear, the weight, the impossible odds stacking against us. He's alive, I said, voice barely above a whisper. Victor, the man who trained me, who shaped everything I became. He's the one behind all of this. Amelia sank into the chair beside me, processing the revelation. She'd heard fragments of Victor's name before, whispered in my nightmares or mentioned in passing stories I could never fully explain. What does he want? She asked, though I could see in her eyes she already knew the answer. Everything, I replied. He wants to erase me, and everyone connected to me. We're not just fighting criminals anymore, Amelia. We're fighting a ghost with resources, connections, and a vendetta decades in the making. The silence between us was heavy with unspoken fears. But then, something shifted in Amelia's expression, not surrender, but steely determination. Then we stop running, she said firmly. We fight back. Together. Her courage in the face of impossible odds reminded me why I fell in love with her in the first place. She wasn't just my wife. She was my partner in the truest sense. Preston arrived later that morning, and I showed him the video. His face grew grave as Victor's threats played out on screen. This changes the entire game, Preston said, rewinding and analyzing every frame. Victor has political connections, financial resources, and operational experience. But he's also arrogant. He revealed himself because he believes you're already beaten. That's his mistake, I said quietly. We spent the next several days redesigning our strategy. No longer defensive, we shifted to offensive operations, calculated, precise, designed to dismantle Victor's network piece by piece. Every contact Victor had, every financial thread, every shadow operative, we mapped them all, looking for weaknesses, cracks in the armor he'd built around himself. The fight ahead wouldn't be won with brute force. It would require intelligence, patience, and turning Victor's own tactics against him. Because if there was one thing I learned in 20 years of Black Ops, it was this. Every hunter eventually becomes the hunted. And Victor's time was coming. The balancing act we had been performing for months suddenly demanded precision like never before. Victor's shadow stretched long and dark over every part of my life, threading its way through old contacts, legal frameworks, and covert allies. But I knew that even the most intricate webs could unravel with enough pressure, and we were poised to apply that pressure. Preston and I had spent countless hours poring over every shred of evidence, legal document, and intelligence report that could be weaponized against Victor. This wasn't just a battle fought in the streets or under the cover of darkness. It was a war waged in courtrooms, boardrooms, and behind encrypted computer screens. Every phone call was monitored, every email decrypted, every potential lead followed with painstaking care. We learned to move with patient, surgical strikes, dismantling Victor's network one piece at a time. Victor was a master at playing the long game. He wore his power like armor, confident that his network's vast protections would keep him untouchable. But his arrogance was his greatest fault. It blinded him to the fact I was no longer a soldier fighting alone. I was a strategist, a protector, and a man fueled by the fiercest love. The months of preparation culminated in a carefully orchestrated takedown. Law enforcement agencies, spurred on by Preston's relentless legal work, moved in quietly but decisively. The financial trails we uncovered revealed corruption, money laundering, and ties to dangerous political players. It all began to collapse beneath the weight of truth. Victor's empire, once thought impregnable, started crumbling. But dismantling a shadow empire is never clean or simple. Retaliation was swift and ruthless. Threats mulled through our circle, anonymous calls, untraceable packages, subtle warnings delivered with blunt consequences. Even friends became wary, hesitant to be drawn into a fight so dangerous and personal. Throughout it all, Amelia and Harper remained the heart of my focus. Their safety was a non-negotiable priority. We fortified our home, shifting routines, and always kept watchful eyes on every move. Amelia transformed before me. The frightened woman who once clung to hope in the darkest nights had blossomed into something fierce and formidable. She learned the language of silence and secrecy, reading danger with a keen eye and standing resolute beside me. Together, we became more than survivors. We became hunters. The final confrontation wasn't violent in the way many expect. It was a chess match played with law, media, and the exposure of years of lies. Victor's power unraveled in courtrooms filled not with gunfire, but with testimony, evidence, and the relentless pursuit of justice. Witnesses we'd coaxed from silence spoke up, recounting Victor's schemes and brutality. Documents long hidden surfaced, revealing his manipulation and control. His carefully crafted network was exposed and systematically dismantled. I watched as the proud man who once controlled my fate was broken piece by piece, not through bullets or bombs, but through truth and consequence. Amelia and Harper watched too, their eyes tracing the slow but undeniable fall of the monster who'd put them all in danger. Our world would never be the same. The scars of the past and this battle echoed quietly beneath every laugh and shared moment. But now those scars symbolized survival, strength, and resilience. We had fought not just to protect our lives, but to claim our legacy, a legacy rooted not in violence, but in courage and justice. The final checkmate delivered wasn't a moment frozen in gunfire, but one defined by patience, wisdom, and love. With Victor confined behind bars and his empire dismantled, our family began the slow process of healing. We rebuilt trust brick by brick, learning to live again beneath skies no longer darkened by fear. The war had taken much, but it never broke us. Standing side by side with Amelia and Harper, I realized that true strength comes not from the battles we fight alone, but from the bonds that hold us together through every storm. Our fight was over, but our story, our healing, was just beginning. The silence after the storm is never quiet. It lingers in the corners of your mind, in the spaces between heartbeats, in the way the world holds its breath and waits. For Amelia, Harper, and me, that silence came with weight. But it was a different weight than the one we'd carried for so long, a weight that told us we had survived. Together, the courtroom doors closed behind Victor as he was led away, shackled not just in chains but in the truth. The empire of lies, corruption, and cruelty he built crumbled piece by piece beneath the steady hand of justice we forced in motion. But the victory wasn't a triumphant roar. It was a quiet exhale, the settling of dust after a long war. Amelia sat next to me, her hand warm in mine. The face I loved showed all the marks of strength earned in fire. The aching eyes, the determined set of her jaw, the softness that only comes from painful healing. Harper was asleep in her bed, safe now, untouched by the shadows that had followed us for so long. I looked around our home, now peaceful but forever changed, and realized how much we had endured, and how much we still carried with us. The scars of today were born in the battles of yesterday. They would never fully disappear, but they had shaped us. I thought about every difficult choice, the lies told to protect, the secrets kept to shield, the silent sacrifices made in the name of love. I thought about Victor, how he underestimated the strength born from family and hope. But most of all, I thought about the future, the fragile, fragile future we were beginning to build piece by piece. So here, in this moment of quiet reflection, I want to share with you something deeper than just a story. I want to ask you a question that carries the weight of every heart that has ever been broken, every soul that has ever been betrayed. When the darkness closes in, when the people you trust fracture and the world threatens to swallow you whole, what is that one thing that holds you steady? What is it that keeps you fighting, keeps you rising, keeps you believing? Is it hope? Is it love? Is it a promise made silently to yourself or to those you hold dear? That question is yours. I'd love to hear your answer. Now, I want to connect with you, to know where you're watching from, what beats your heart, where your story unfolds. So, please, write in the comments. Where are you watching this story from? Your city, your country? And more importantly, tell me what kinds of stories you want to hear next. Do you crave raw tales of quiet revenge, emotional justice, and family drama? Or are you drawn to high-octane military action or stories of survival against all odds? I want to bring you the stories that will touch your soul, that will sit heavy in your chest hours after the video ends, because you deserve nothing less. If this story moved you, if it made you think or feel, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and share your story with me through your comments. I promise you, the next story, the next epic tale of betrayal and revenge, will be waiting here for you. Together, we're not just telling stories, we're living them. Together, we're a family bound by shared struggles and shared hopes. Thank you for trusting me with your time and your attention. Until we meet again, stay safe, stay strong. Remember, no matter how dark the night may seem, every dawn holds the promise of healing and new beginnings.